Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something pretty fascinating. The realities of starting a black soldier fly farming business. It's one of those topics that sounds kind of out there, but it's gaining some serious traction in the sustainability world.
It is, it is. And to guide us through this, we've got this awesome Q&A session with Marjanen.
Yeah.
He's the founder and CEO of Manna Insect.
Right. And if you're into this whole insect farming scene, Manna Insect, they're a pretty big deal in this space.
Definitely leading the charge.
So what we really wanted to pull out from this Q&A with Yeke is, the nitty gritty. If you're someone thinking, hey, maybe I want to start a BSF farm, what are your options for actually selling those larvae? Where's the money?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It is. And it's not as straightforward as you might think. Yeke himself actually points out that getting those larvae to market, actually turning them into a product that you can sell, it's a huge hurdle. I mean, it's right up there with just mastering the farming process itself.
Yeah, for sure. It's one thing to grow them. It's a whole other thing to figure out, okay, now what?
Exactly. So, you think about BSF and you think, okay, what can I make with this? Live larvae, dried larvae, maybe some oil. There's talk about all these fancy applications.
Right. Where you start dreaming big, like BSF biofuel, here I come.
Exactly. But Yike brings us back down to earth pretty quick. He's like, hold on. If you're starting small, some of that stuff is way down the road.
Yeah. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He's like, listen, to get into those high-tech products, you're looking at serious investment.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars, he mentioned.
Yeah, big money. So for most folks starting out, it's about finding a market that's, well, a bit more accessible. And, he really steers the conversation towards chickens.
Yeah.
And specifically chicken feed.
It seems like such a simple solution, right? Chickens, they eat bugs.
It makes sense when you think about it. And for someone starting out, Yekte says there are really two main products that make sense: live larvae and whole dried larvae.
Okay, so break it down for us. What kind of chicken farmer wants live larvae?
Well, Yike says live larvae are ideal for egg-laying hens.
Okay.
And it's not just about the nutrition, although, they do get a little protein boost. It's more about, keeping the hens stimulated, engaging their natural foraging instincts.
Oh, interesting. So it's like giving them a little enrichment activity. They're not just pecking at boring old feed all day.
Exactly. And happier hens, well, they tend to lay more eggs, so it's a win-win.
Gotcha. Now, what about those dried larvae? Who are those for?
Dried larvae, those are more for the broiler chickens, the ones raised for meat.
Okay.
And here it's more about replacing a chunk of their regular feed, stuff like soy meal, with something more sustainable.
Right. So you could potentially sell larger volumes of dried larvae to those bigger broiler farms.
Exactly.
Now, one thing that UK mentions that I thought was interesting, you might think, oh, I'll just raise tons of larvae and sell them in bulk to some big processing plant.
Yeah, just become a larva supplier.
Yeah. But he's like, whoa. Not so fast.
Yeah, he pours some cold water on that idea.
He says that market for bulk live larvae, it's just not really there yet.
It's not mature enough, There aren't that many companies equipped to handle all those wriggly little guys on a massive scale.
So you're probably going to have to do at least some basic processing yourself.
Like drying.
Drying, yeah.
Yeah, which of course brings up the whole question of drying and freezing.
Yeah, because theoretically, once you've got those larvae dried or frozen, it opens up possibilities for shipping them further.
Right. It's easier to store, easier to transport.
So why not go all in on that? Set up a whole processing operation right there on the farm.
Well, UK makes a really interesting comparison. He talks about chicken farming. Most chicken farmers, they focus on raising the birds, right? They're not usually running their own slaughterhouses or processing plants.
Yeah, makes sense.
And he says BSF farming should be similar, at least for now. Focus on the growing, keep the processing simple.
So it's not just about the cost of the equipment then?
No, it's more than that. Yuka points out that advanced processing, it requires a whole other level of knowledge. You need people who understand the science of it all, like amino acid profiles, stuff like that.
It's a whole different skill set.
Yeah.
So for most BSF farmers, at least starting out, it seems like the most practical option is that direct connection with chicken farmers.
Yeah. Live larvae, dried larvae, delivered straight to the farm.
It reminds me of how traditional agriculture works. You have farmers who grow crops.
Yeah.
And then they often contract with bigger companies to process and distribute those crops.
Yeah, it seems like that's the direction the BSF industry is heading in as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Eventually, you'll have these networks of BSF farms supplying bigger processing hubs,
Yeah.
kind of like how we have feed suppliers and all that infrastructure for traditional livestock.
Exactly. But as EK points out, we're not quite there yet. Right now, as a BSF farmer, you're kind of on your own. You got to figure out your pricing, you got to find your own buyers. It's a lot of work, especially if you're new to this whole
It's
world.
a lot more entrepreneurial.
Definitely. And that's why, he keeps emphasizing, keep it simple. Focus on chicken feed. It's a market that's already there, a need that's easy to understand.
Makes sense.
So that is, I think, the core takeaway from the globally local aspect that UK highlights.
Now, that's an interesting concept. Globally local. What does he mean by that?
Well, what he's getting at is that BSF farming, it can work pretty much anywhere. You just need, like, a source of organic waste. And there are chicken farms pretty much all over the world.
Right. So you could have these little pockets of BSF production popping up all over the place, each one tailored to its local environment.
Exactly. It's all about utilizing local resources, local waste streams to produce a high-quality protein source.
And that's a huge advantage, right? BSF can turn stuff that would otherwise be considered waste into something valuable.
Yeah. UK really hammers that point home. He says that's one of the biggest cost advantages of BSF farming, utilizing those cheap or even free waste products. It means you can potentially produce feed that's more sustainable and even cheaper than traditional options.
Okay, so that's chicken feed. But what about fish feed? There's a lot of buzz about using insect protein in aquaculture.
Oh, yeah. There's a ton of research showing that BSF larvae are great for all kinds of fish, salmon, trout, shrimp, tilapia, even clams.
So it seems like a natural fit, right?
Well, UK is a little cautious on this one.
Really?
Yeah, he's like, look, the science is there. BSF is good for fish. But he says getting into the aquaculture market, it's a whole different ballgame.
How so?
Well, for one thing, the nutritional requirements for fish are much more specific.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about protein content anymore.
No, you got to really dial in the composition of your larvae, make sure they have the right balance of amino acids and all those other nutrients that specific fish need.
Right. And that probably requires really precise control over what you're feeding the larvae themselves, right?
Yeah, exactly. You got to manage their diet, which can be tricky. And then there are all these regulations around fish feed that are much stricter than, say, chicken feed.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's a lot more complicated. Even big companies, EK says, have struggled to crack the aquaculture market. So his advice is, if you're starting out, stick with chickens.
keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Maybe down the line, if there are companies in your area that specialize in fish feed, you could partner up with them. But for now, chickens are the way to go.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's talk about the other product you get from BSF farming. Frass. Frass.
Insect poop.
It's black gold, some people call it.
Right. I mean, it's supposed to be amazing for soil, right?
Oh.
All those nutrients.
Yeah, it's got all this potential. It's great for regenerative agriculture, building healthy soil. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
UK says the frass market, it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, there's not like this clear established demand for it yet. Some people want it in bulk, for large scale farming. Some people just want a little bag of it for their garden. And there aren't many companies out there that are like buying frass in bulk and turning it into a commercial product.
So what's a farmer to do with all their frass?
UK suggests, start small. Test it out with your local community. Give some to gardeners. See how it works on different plants. Build up some local buzz.
Word of mouth marketing, basically.
Exactly. If you can show people how well it works, they'll start asking for it.
And that's something you could do even without a fancy lab or anything.
Exactly. You can run your own little experiments, get real world results.
I like that approach.
Yeah, and the other thing UK points out is that we're still learning about frass.
Right.
The traditional fertilizer industry, they've got decades of research behind them.
Yeah.
Frass is still kind of new. We're figuring out the best ways to use it, the best ways to market it.
So there's definitely a lot of potential there, but it's still early days.
Exactly. But, Manna insects, they're trying to help bridge that gap. They've launched this platform called Insect Farm Hub.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
It's basically a marketplace where BSF farmers can connect with potential buyers.
Well, that's cool. So if I'm a farmer with larvae or frass to sell, I can just list it on there.
Yeah, exactly. And if I'm a buyer, I can go there and find multiple suppliers in one place.
So it creates more stability, right?
Right. UK says that's one of the biggest hurdles right now.
Yeah.
Buyers are often hesitant to commit to a single farmer because, what if something goes wrong? What if there's a production issue?
Right, that makes sense.
But if they can see that there are multiple farmers in the network, they feel more confident. They know there's a backup if one supplier falls through.
Like a safety net.
Exactly. And listing on Insect Farm Hub, it's free, so there's really no downside for farmers.
Right.
So it's a win-win.
Now, you mentioned earlier that frass might have potential in aquaculture too. Is that something Ye talks about?
He does touch on it briefly. He says, theoretically, frass could be a good supplement in fish feed,
Yeah.
but he thinks it's probably going to be a while before we see that happening on a large scale.
Why is that?
Well, for one thing, there are all those regulations around fish feed that we talked about. And then, he says, frass and larvae, they're likely going to be treated as separate products from a regulatory standpoint.
Oh, I see.
So even if frass turns out to be great for fish, it might be a while before the rules catch up. So for now, he says, focus on using frass as fertilizer, or maybe even as a drying agent for your larvae.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, let's talk pricing.
Pricing.
What's a farmer to do? How do you figure out what to charge for frass? It seems like it would depend a lot on, the quality and all that.
Yeah, UK says frass pricing, it's all over the map. It depends on the nutrient content, like how much nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium it's got. It depends on the moisture content. It even depends on the local demand.
So how do you even start figuring that out?
UK says, look at the prices of other organic fertilizers in your area.
Okay.
Compare your frass to those and see where it fits in.
Makes sense. What about for the larva?
For dried larvae, he gives a rough guideline. He says, aim for about 1.3 times the price of soy meal on a protein basis.
Okay. So if soy meal is going for, say, 400 euros a ton,
then you could potentially sell your dried larva for like 700 euros a ton.
Okay. But he emphasizes, don't get too hung up on those global benchmarks.
Right. Local prices are what matters.
Local prices. Got it. Now, another thing that came up in the Q&A is the idea of BSF farming as a waste management business.
Oh, right. Like getting paid to take people's food waste and then turning it into larvae.
Exactly. Is that a viable model?
UK says it really depends on the regulations in your area.
Interesting. How so?
Well, in some places, like the EU, businesses have to pay to get rid of their organic waste.
Oh, okay.
So if you can offer them a cheaper alternative by taking that waste off their hands, you can actually make money on both ends,
You get paid to take the waste, and then you sell the larvae.
Exactly. Double win. But in other parts of the world, waste disposal is often free or, it's not as regulated.
Right.
So in those cases, it might make more sense to just focus on selling the larvae as feed.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's all about understanding your local context.
Totally.
Now, before we wrap up, Ye mentions some really exciting potential for BSF in the future.
Oh, yeah. He talks about bio-oils, biodiesel. There's even talk about using BSF in biomedical applications.
Wow. It sounds like this little insect could be a game changer.
It could be. But Ye cautions, that stuff is still a ways off. He sees the BSF industry developing in two main directions. One is small to medium scale protein production, mostly for animal feed. And that's happening now, especially in developing countries.
Okay.
And the other direction is those high value extractions, the bio oils and all that. And that's more likely to be driven by bigger companies with lots of resources.
Makes sense.
So his advice for individual farmers is focus on the basics for now. Chickens, frass, maybe waste management.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple and let those big companies figure out the fancy stuff.
Sounds like good advice. So to sum it all up, what are the key takeaways for someone who's thinking about starting a BSF farm today?
Okay, here's the cheat sheet.
Okay.
Number 1, chickens. Your best bet is to produce live or dried larvae and sell them to local chicken farmers.
Okay.
Number 2, frass. Use it on your own farm or find some local gardeners who want it.
Okay.
Number 3, waste management. If the rules in your area make it worthwhile, go for it. And the overall message is, don't overthink it. Focus on what's working now and build from there.
Solid advice.
Solid advice.
So for you listening out there thinking about joining the BSF revolution, remember, start local. Think chickens. Get creative with your frass.
And don't be afraid to get your hands dirty.
Exactly. It's an exciting field.
It is.
It's all about finding those practical, sustainable solutions. Marjanen's insights really make you think about the potential of these localized food systems, taking something that's often seen as waste and turning it into a valuable resource.
Yeah, it challenges us to rethink how we produce food.
It does. It does. So maybe take a look around your community.
Yeah.
Who are the chicken farmers in your area? What kind of waste is being generated?
Yeah.
Maybe there's an opportunity there. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll catch you next time.